All right. Hello, hello, hello. On this broadcast, we're going to be having a great interview talking about a brand new Kickstarter project that just launched yesterday. And we're going to be talking about creating specifically with the Kickstarter market in mind. And so I have some tremendous guests to bring on the show to talk about that. My guests today are Clay Adams, who is a returning champion to the podcast. He's back. And Clay is a comic book writer. He runs Fried Comics and has been serving up hits such as Red Christmas, Deadskins, PBOW, and more. Clay is also one of the masterminds and editors behind the Nightmare Theater series of horror anthologies, which have done very well on Kickstarter. And he is a successful voice actor by trade with credits including Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Yu-Gi-Oh, and much more. I'm also excited because Clay is not coming here alone. He is joined by his artist and collaborator, Mick Beyers. Mick's making his comics launch debut. His credits include Source Point Press's Hollow and an upcoming issue of White Ash from Scout Comics, as well as original projects, including A Queen of Marks, Rovers, and Royo Cheeks. So Clay, Mick, welcome to the show. How you guys doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having us.
Yeah. I'm excited to have you. And then Mick, great to have you here for the first time.
Yeah, no, it's nice.
Yeah. Well, we're going to hopefully have a great chat here. I don't want to waste any time bringing up the focus of our discussion here, because you guys have a new project that launched, I believe, yesterday on Kickstarter. It looks like it just crossed over into the funding territory. This is Dreamquest. Maybe Clay, you want to start us out by sharing a little bit more about this latest project, what it is, what's cool about it, and anything that we should know.
Yeah, absolutely. So it came out of the Nightmare Theater anthology, our second book. For those of you who don't know, Nightmare Theater is a love letter to horror movies. And so what I thought might be cool is to do the old Hollywood thing of taking a story and just using the title and some characters, but making up your own story. That has nothing to do with the original material. So we took a Lovecraft story, Beyond the Wall of Sleep, which comes from the Dream Cycle, and just had a blast doing it. Mick had some really inventive layouts, some great art, and I had a blast writing the story. And we thought, well, let's do a sequel. Let's do a one-shot, 48 pages. Sequel to Beyond the Wall of Sleep. And so we've done that here. So Margot Carter, great grandniece, I guess, of Lovecraft character Randolph Carter, is going beyond the Wall of Sleep to rescue her great uncle, but there's a monster who stands in her way.
Awesome. And so Mick, what can you add to Clay's description here, and what was exciting for you about jumping on this project?
This is only the second full issue, all of drawn for someone else, instead of writing and drawing myself, and I really enjoy the challenge of that more than I thought I would. And so, like, as you mentioned, I drew an issue of White Ash. That was the first issue I'd drawn for someone else. And Clay and I had been talking about this project for a while after doing the short story. And it was, I could spend a lot of time trying to write and draw my own thing again, or I could let him do half the work and just coast on his success.
Yeah, sometimes it is nice to just see what happens when you put multiple cooks in the kitchen and each kind of focus on your area of expertise. One of the advices or pieces of advice that gets shared a lot, but I think more creators should actually do, is just the power of collaborating on smaller projects first. And so, it seemed like the one shot that you guys worked on for the Nightmare Theater anthology, that was, limited page count. But how was that experience for you, Mick? And did that sort of do anything to make it easier to say yes to Clay for a bigger project like this one right here?
I mean, we'd already decided to work on a project together, and we tossed around multiple ideas. I think then doing the Dreamquest short gave us direction to move forward with this particular story versus some of the other ones we'd been talking about. I mean, like, I don't know, like, it's nice. It's nice not only working with someone, but working with someone who's physically close, uh, where we can like bounce ideas directly off one another and everything. Uh, and so it's definitely like both of those aspects of it are, what appealed to me.
Yeah, so this is a rarity, I think, in today's sort of international, cross-continental collaborations where, I mean, I know many creators that have been working with writers or artists for years and have never actually been in the same room. But you guys have done something so that you're in the same room pretty often, right? So tell us a little bit about the studio that you're in, and I guess Clay, what's some of the advantages of that?
Yeah. So, yeah, Mick and I rented a space. We've got an office here together. And what's great about it is, yeah, besides being in the same room with somebody that you're working with, and you can just, immediately talk and work things out. Like I acted out the climax of Dreamquest in front of Mick, showing him what I had in mind. Like that's super helpful. But then there are other benefits, like just doing all the Kickstarter fulfillment, having a place to store all the books. The building, because it's an office building, it has a loading dock, so I save on shipping because they don't, when they drop off a pallet, it's not at my house. There's usually a charge, an extra charge, couple $100 to drop off books at a residential location. So having that is a big benefit. Not having to run to the post office is a big benefit. We can drop off packages at the front desk and it gets picked up. So there were a lot of benefits, and then just obviously, like, this work can be so lonely when you're just sitting in a room by yourself and talking with someone halfway across the world. I mean, it's great, and I love every collaborator I work with. But there is just something that's nice about being with other people physically. And I think that especially coming out of the pandemic, where we spent 2 years of like not seeing anyone, for the most part, it was really important to me to like get out of the house, get around other people. And it's definitely helped get the creative juices flowing.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. And Mick, that I assume prior to this you were kind of set up at home. Has there been any other advantages for you just to get doing some of your work outside of the house as an artist?
I don't know. I mean, like, I feel productive either place. Like when I was at home, I was streaming on Twitch a lot while I was drawing. So, I didn't have the immediacy of someone in the room, but I still had an audience and I had people to interact with, and talk to, and that was nice. But like having Clay physically in the room to work through stuff and to act out scenes that we might have questions about in the book, and like, a space to keep stuff, a space to fulfill out of, like, it is definitely an upgrade over, like my one corner of our spare bedroom and half the closet therein, that everything had to come out of beforehand.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so I want to talk a little bit more about what you guys are up to here on Kickstarter, and something that as someone, I guess with both of you have a lot of experience of launching projects and different kinds of projects on Kickstarter, and I know, Clay, something that you've been trying to do and you've sort of learned to notice is that it takes the same amount of work to launch basically a Kickstarter that appeals to potentially a smaller market as it does to one that appeals to a bigger market. And so you've been trying to be a little bit more strategic in what you're putting out to the world, given that Kickstarter is one of your primary sales channels. Can you talk a little bit about that and your thinking going into this launch, as opposed to how that might be a little bit different than some of the other projects that you've taken on, maybe, or that you started pre-Kickstarter being the main thing that you were focused on? Yeah,
absolutely. So, I've done plenty of just pure passion projects. And so I have nothing against anybody that wants to come to Kickstarter to fund a passion project. but I've learned that, as you say, it takes the same amount of work to do something that, you know, people may or may not want as it does to, it's actually more work, I guess, to put something on Kickstarter that the Kickstarter audience isn't necessarily looking for, than it does to put something out there that they are. And so I started to try to pay attention to what those things were and sort of see, you know, now you can, there's an old concept about writing to market, right? Like knowing what the people want. If you like, you know, if you want to write something, there are certain genres that sell, right? Maybe romance is your thing if you're doing prose, and you've got to know the romance market and what that audience wants. And so I tried to do a similar thing where I was just studying Kickstarters and seeing what worked, and then also finding that Venn diagram where the things that I like to do overlap with the things that Kickstarter likes to buy. Because this really is, right now for comics, this is really a fantastic market. I mean, I've spoken to a lot of people who are in the direct market who say that Kickstarter is where they make their money.
Yeah.
And it and I've noticed that too. It's like there's a reach, and there's something cool about being in the direct market, but there's also something cool about making some money off of what it is that you're doing. So once I started to approach Kickstarter as a market and as a place where people go to buy books, because they do, there is an audience there, and there, you know, as you've pointed out many times, that's why Kickstarter is superior to other platforms, is because that's where the audience is. And so I started looking at what was selling. Obviously, Lovecraft stuff does very well on Kickstarter, and then you know, sometimes some of the more, shall we say, mature covers sell well. And so, you know, I started to look at like, well, how, you know, I kind of started to joke that like, if you really wanted to make good money on Kickstarter, you make a Lovecraft book with boobs. And you know, we didn't quite do that, but we sort of did that, you know, like I had to
They're there.
they're there if you want them. But we had to, for me at least, it was important to find a way where it was like natural to the project, and not that we were just like, you know, putting this up there just to sell books, you know, like you know, we have this wonderful fantasy cover by Luca Strati, who did Mars Attacks Red Sonja covers, and that's the main project image there. And yeah, and a lot of the stuff he was doing, just I was seeing on his personal, you know, gallery, like they were fantasy nudes, and like that is a thing and that is a market. And so I thought, well, okay, we'll get a safe for work version, and then let's get a not safe for work version, because that's something that's in his wheelhouse, and that's something that fits the genre that he was doing. And then there's a scene in the book where Margot goes to rescue her great uncle Randolph, and when she enters dreams, she's in the middle of a nightmare where she's shown up at work naked, and that's I think that's something like we've all had that, you know, it's like the actor's nightmare where you're on stage and you don't know your lines, you know. And so this was like we thought like a common touchstone, and we thought, okay, well this could make a good cover. So Samantha Branch did that cover for us. We call it Naked Nightmare, and it sort of depicts that scene. And again, there's a safe for work version and a not safe for work version, but we thought that those were tastefully done and matched the tone of the book.
Yeah, it is interesting how like sometimes I'll see the covers that play those games, and it's like, does this have anything to do with the book that you're offering? like or just, but I like that you tried to find ways to walk that line. I'm curious, I guess. And what about the content like inside the book? Like where would you like? What in terms of like a age rating or maturity stuff, like what did you have rules for yourself as to compared to what could be in the book? Or
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. We didn't, there's not, there's no sexy time in the book. There's no sex. There's no, nothing graphic. But there is that scene where she shows up at work naked, and it's not played for titillation. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but that's not how the scene was played. But we are thinking that it's like, an R-rated horror book. There's horror and gore, and it's very much Lovecraftian horror. So it's not just about like blood and guts and that kind of thing. But we really kind of looked as our model. We looked to Reanimator, the old movie adaptation, and that was something that sort of took Lovecraft's story, expanded on it, changed it a little bit, did add some more quote unquote mature elements to it, and came up with something that was like really interesting and unique, and found an audience and seemed to have hit with people. So that's really like what we were going for. We kind of pitched this as Reanimator meets Dream Warriors.
Yeah. Now, Mick, like, one of the fun parts, but also the challenges of a project like this, where you're dealing in dreamscapes and you're dealing with Lovecraftian monsters and madness-inducing imagery, is that a lot of that is going to fall on you, the artist. It's easy for Clay to write, draw a horrifying squid monster or what have you, but to actually make it horrifying, that's going to fall on you. What was your approach to tackling this and playing with layouts in order to capture like the dream nature of this, and as well as the horrifying stuff?
I'm not sure. Mostly it's opening the canvas and then just throwing down squiggly lines. I mean, like, how can I make this work? Like, looking at Clay's script, how can I leave him without enough room to include all this dialogue so I can draw what I want? And then, he'll give me notes, and I'll figure something out after that. So it's, I'm thinking more about the flow of dialogue from one balloon to the next than I am panel borders necessarily, and strictly obeying like left, right, up, down, the 180-degree rule, any of that stuff. Like it's a dream, so like I'm not worrying about perspective all that much when she's in the dream world, and like, how do I want to lead your eye around with the word balloons, whether or not that violates any of the standard rules.
Yeah, and that's, I got to say, that's one thing that I loved about Mick's work on Beyond the Wall of Sleep, which is the prequel story we did for Nightmare Theater. I wrote those dream pages as single pages, and it was Mick's idea to turn them into double page spreads. And they were really inventive. I mean, that's one thing I've always appreciated about his work, is that the layouts are so inventive and engaging. And he really came through on those sequences. And so I think for me as a writer, knowing that he was going to bring that to a full 48-page book was really exciting. And so I know he's happy to be drawing the dreamscape stuff, because he can just go nuts and do what he wants.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, we're in an interesting time. Obviously Kickstarter is such a big part of the indie comic market, and it seems like it does make a lot of sense to be trying to look towards Kickstarter as like, okay, what kind of projects seem to really pop over there. And yet at the same time, as a publisher and with an existing fan base, you have to balance that as well. Just the other day, I was sort of sent over a pitch for like a really excellent book, great production value, high concept, a hook, some unique factors and selling points. And it really came across to me like, oh, this is a book that should do phenomenal on Kickstarter. but it was also very much not a Comics Tribe book. Like our existing audience would be
Yeah.
like, wait a minute, where's the guy with the fox head hitting people with shovels in this one? There's none of that, you know?
Right. Right.
And so, you know, I guess I'm curious, as someone that has an existing audience, has an imprint, Fried Comics, that this is being published under, you know, what are some ways in that you're able to say, okay, you know, we're going to do a Lovecraft thing. We're going to push the envelope with our, you know, strategic covers here. But this is still a Fried Comics book. What are some ways that this sort of still fits in with the ethos of what fans have come to expect from you?
Yeah, that was a tough question because this is so different from what we normally do with Fried. But the Fried stuff it's horror comedy, really. You know, Deadskins and Red Christmas and PBOW, like they all have elements of horror in them. Some more than others. So I felt like there was a thread there. You know, Fried originally started with things that I had co-written with Alexander O. Philippe. And then as he's gotten busy with his directorial career, you know, he's had less time to make comics. So, you know, I thought about, well, I could do an imprint, I could do this, I could do that. But at the end of the day, like it's all the same book, you know, like it's all the same, like genre. It's all the same. It's still me. And I should not shy away from that. Like if I had created a new Kickstarter account, I don't feel like this book would have done as well off the bat, because I'd be starting from scratch.
Right.
And I could have, I guess I could have launched this with Bloodline Comics, with you know, the line that does Nightmare Theater. That's what I do with Dave Schrader. And I could have done that, but you know, Dave and I kind of have our own plans for some books coming up, and so I didn't want the schedule to conflict. And I had already launched another book that was a little bit outside of the Fried zone with Blazing Blade of Frankenstein.
Right.
So I felt this was of a piece with that, and at the end of the day, I decided I wasn't going to lose sleep over it.
Yeah. And so I guess talk to me a little bit about the size of the book, because another thing that I think a lot of creators are seeing with Kickstarter is like, you're not, because you have the ability to charge a little bit more, because the audience is willing to support that, because there's a shipping fee that's going to be incurred one way or another. There is not the same kind of incentives to keep all of comics just to like 20 pages and launch. So how'd you guys come about, you know, coming up with the right size for this as a sort of a 48 page one shot?
That's something we kicked around, like just like when we were kind of figuring out the story, you know, early on, it was like, we'll just write to the size of the story and use as many pages as we needed.
Yeah.
And like of the 4 Kickstarters I've done, the 2 that were like my best books were each 48 pages. So like that 48 page thing is like right inside my wheelhouse. It's where I feel comfortable. Like you get a solid chunk of story. You can tell a beginning, a middle, and an end. But then, because I'm not trying to push out one of these every month or every other month, like it's substantial enough that, you know, you can wait until the next one hit, because it's also going to be a sizable portion of story. It's not going to be, I waited 6 months for, you know, 20 pages that I read in 5 minutes and then I was done, you know.
Yeah.
Like even if it ends up being 6 months, like you still, I feel like it's not, you know, like 48 pages is not just 2 books. Like you can tell 3 or 4 books worth of story in 48 pages. It's not a linear, you know, scale as you move up in page count. And so what we managed to get through in these 48 pages is a significant chunk of this story, of a story, of action, of horror. Like we can get through a lot in these 48 pages.
Yeah, we'd originally talked about maybe doing it as 32, but as I started writing and we started talking more about it, like they were going to be a very packed 32 pages. And so I was talking to Frank Pittarisi, the editor, And he was like, why not just, why keep it to 32? Give yourself 48 pages.
Because I'd be almost done if it was 32. We'd almost be done with the book.
That's true. That's true.
32 pages.
We wanted Mick to work harder. And
That's the short answer.
But I don't know. Maybe you would have worked harder trying to cram this into 32 pages. That's possible too. But Frank was very much felt like in the comics world, at least in the direct market, 48 pages is a known thing, right?
Yeah.
The 48 page special, it is a known quantity. And so it wasn't just like a random number we pulled out, but we have looked at other, again, like to your point about writing to market, like we have looked at other books that have done well on Kickstarter, and they do tend to be a little bit longer because, as you say, you can charge more for it. As Mick was saying, you can put more story in there. And we definitely wanted to tell a complete story and have people feel like they got the whole thing and that they don't have to, back 5 campaigns to get the whole story. On the other hand, if this does insanely well, we are happy to bring you a sequel. So keep those pledges coming.
Absolutely. So yeah, this thing funded in a little over 24, or maybe a little before.
Just under.
Just under.
Awesome.
As soon as Clay left the office this morning to go do something, I don't know what, like it chimed, we crossed the finish line, and I had no one to celebrate with because he'd just abandoned me. But I'm not bitter.
So he missed your dance.
That's right.
Yeah. And so, I mean, do you have like because this was done, in a perfect marriage of both art and commerce. I mean, do you guys have an internal number of like, okay, if this does it this well, then we're going to count this as a success, and or this is going to be a or this is what we're shooting for, or was this more of a, all right, let's take a crack and see what we think after it's all said and done?
I think a little from column A and a little from column B.
Yeah.
As you know from doing so many of these, like you have a number you put out there, and then there's that number in your head that you're hoping for, and sometimes that number is, you have a number that's like wildly unrealistic, where you're like, man, in a perfect world, this would do that kick track first day numbers, that they always project, like you're going to make $120,000 on this campaign. But then you do have that number where you go, okay, this is a solid hit, this is a solid payday for us, and it makes sense for us to rush out another book.
Yeah.
Like I think there's a number that you have as a creator where you go, okay, this funded and I was able to get it done. Is it worth my while to make a bunch of these? I don't know. And then there's a number where you go, okay, well, this did well, and I put some money in my pocket, and it definitely is worth me doing a few more of these. And then there's that number where you go, oh wow, I need to like very quickly get something else out, just like this.
Yeah.
And so we're hoping to hit one of the two later numbers, I guess you could say.
Yeah. And so one of the things that we've talked about, and I know you've experimented with, is changing the length and duration of launches. But something that you did here, and I've been having success, shortening launches and getting them, like less than 30, but not terribly, short. Tend to be the bigger launches that we do. But I do know when you're sort of stepping into a new genre or a new category for yourself, that giving yourself the full 30 days can actually be a really good thing. So like, what made you say, okay, 30 days is this is going to be this is a 30-day launch versus maybe a little bit shorter before? What was
because
sort of on your mind there?
I need time to finish the book. I need time to finish the drawing. So it needs to be 30 days. All my campaigns I've done on 30 days. I briefly flirted with doing a shorter campaign on, I think, like my second Mars book. But like, why? Like, it's just, I'm cutting out days that, people could trickle in and commit to the project. And with the Mars book, like, it was already done before I launched. So, time wasn't necessarily a consideration. Like I was working on a different project during those 30 days.
Yeah.
But it gives me extra time, just to watch a number go up, which I enjoy quite a bit.
Yeah, because I've done shorter campaigns, especially like around the holidays, when I didn't want to get into, having a book live at Christmas or anything like that. Not necessarily because I think those, you can't do well on those holidays, because I've definitely heard of creators who have. It's more that just for me as a creator, like when it's the holidays, it's the holidays. I don't want to be thinking about this stuff,
Absolutely.
So I definitely did that with Red Christmas, shortening those campaigns. But the last few that I've done, because like when I've been launching something new like Dead Skins or Blazing Blade of Frankenstein, the 30 days I feel like has served me well. One, because it does give you time to get the word out there, and you don't feel that panic of like, oh my God, I only have 7 days, or I only have 2 weeks. I got to do everything I can. You can take maybe a little more leisurely pace and feel like, okay, well, I did all this stuff today and this was a busy day, but like, I don't have to do everything. If some of this stuff happens tomorrow, that's okay. And you've got time to build up that word of mouth, and maybe some people find you that weren't going to find you. I think with the longer campaigns, you might have to suffer through more cancellations at the last minute, because the hot new thing drops, and now suddenly people are trying to decide between backing your book or backing Charlie Stickney's book, or whatever, and Charlie's going to win every time. But
thanks a lot, Mom.
But for me, the campaigns that have done really well have been those 30-day campaigns. But on the other hand, if you have a book that is struggling more, 30 days is a long time, and you go, why didn't I just do 2 weeks on this campaign and just be over with this thing? So
yeah, I think one of the advantages too of the fact that you are writing to a niche that there is a clear market that searches on Kickstarter for, like, say, Lovecraft stuff, is that you are giving yourself more opportunity to just get that organic Kickstarter traffic discovering you over those times, and because this is a new genre that you're tapping into, just giving yourself a little bit more time to get exposed to that audience, as opposed to just having the campaign really be about how can I maximize my existing audience and driving them to the campaign. So I see that being another key thing.
Yeah, for sure. Like today, I was just looking at James Messiah's Flesh Eating Cheerleaders holiday special. And that was like a week-long campaign, but he's already up to 10 grand. Like, it's not hurting him, at all. And so that sense of urgency can be helpful too, for sure. But again, that was like a special related to a book that had already done well. It wasn't the first issue of a new thing.
He already has thousands of customers for that imprint for that title over the past several launches, and so doing these sort of flash quick starter style launches can be a really cool way to just get that surge of funding. And I think, for a Halloween or a Christmas issue like he has, and also like I believe he wants to get that out to his backers in time for Christmas. So there you go. One of the ways you do that is you shave 3 weeks off the Kickstarter campaign so that you can get that information and get it rolling. Right. Let's talk about are there any rewards or any cool things that you guys are doing or offering during this launch that you want to just shine a light on?
Well, Mick, what do you have to show off?
Clay, move. You're in my camera. So as I've been coming into the office to like warm up for the day, I have this giant pad of paper, and I've just been scribbling on this giant pad of paper. And I thought, what would be fun to do a large 18 by 24 sketch for our backers of this campaign, which are available at our $350 tier, in addition to which you receive a copy of every cover of the book.
Nice.
Yeah. And I think we've sold a couple of those already, or at least one. We sold two. We sold two out of three.
Yeah, looks like you only have one left, so you better keep drawing.
I'm on that.
Nick.
It's actually been a lot of fun. I started with like a different picture just to kind of like warm up, and I'm inking those with Sharpies, which I've never done before, but I actually I love the Sharpie. It's a fantastic tool, and I'll never ink with anything else again.
And then he's also doing some sketch covers. We've got those limited to 10, and I think he's looking for a sample over there. And if you don't if you don't want to spring for the sketch cover, or you don't want to spring for the big art, as an add-on, we've got for $50, he'll draw a sketch on your backing board. So there's an example of one that he's done for a previous campaign.
Yeah,
nice.
And then another thing we tried this time that actually sold. I was surprised. We offered the production script, where we printed out a hard copy of the script. That's the one that Mick is using to draw from. So he's making notes. He's doing doodles and layouts in the margins.
I've already spilled water on it twice and Dr. Pepper once, so it's well used. It's loved. It's
a well-loved script. We're gonna bind it with Brad's. We're gonna sign it, and that's already sold. But that was a cool new thing we tried this time.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's one of the things that we always try to stress. How can you take the creation of it and productize the creation of it? And there's a perfect example of one way to do that. And then also, of course, you've got the big bundles of the Fried Comics library in digital and print that people can grab as well.
Yeah, and that to me, that's always such a big thing, is selling the back library, because you've already made these books. As Russell Nolte says, make it once, sell it forever, and that's really what that drives a lot of the funding. People picking up the books, picking up add-ons. We've sold a lot of the digital bundles. People paying $50 to get everything we've ever done. And so that people get a lot of great books, and they help this project fund. So that's definitely something we wanted to throw out there.
Absolutely. Well, this has been great chatting with you guys about this project. It looks awesome, and glad to see it's funded and with a lot of time on the clock. Before the year is out, what else is on the agenda for each of you? Maybe we'll start with Mick and then go to Clay.
After Dreamquest is over, I'm gonna start work on my third Mars book, so I can launch that Kickstarter February of next year. I've got a few things planned for next year, a couple of personal projects, a couple of projects with other creators, but getting that third Mars book out is my priority, because then that'll wrap up the first story arc, and I'll be able to do the collection on that later on in the year. I'm excited about doing the collection on that, because it gives me a Kickstarter I can run that I've done everything for already, and it gives me a buffer, where I can be working on 2 or 3 projects down the road while that one is running.
Absolutely.
And for me, for Bloodline, which is where we do Nightmare Theater, we decided not to do a Nightmare Theater this year, but we are going to do a one-shot focusing on Carmilla, the original literary vampire. She beat Dracula by a few years. And so we had a story that Dave Schrader did in the Nightmare Theater 2 anthology, and we're going to do a one-shot related to that. That's going to come later this year. And then I just got my reprints of Blazing Blade of Frankenstein #1. The first ones were messed up, so I had to go back for a reprint. Those just came in. I'm going to send those out, and hopefully I can squeeze in the second issue this year. Fingers crossed. We'll see.
Well, awesome, gents. It's been a pleasure to chat about this project. We'll be sure to send everyone we can over to Dreamquest on Kickstarter. And thanks so much for sharing your insights about the project.
Yeah, thanks for having us. This has been a blast.
Been great.
Awesome. Well, everybody else, thanks for watching, and we can't wait to see what you launch next. Take care.